All right, let's get right into it. We're talking about a podcast you might have heard of, especially if you follow the German podcast scene. It's called Sucht und Süchtig, which translates to addiction and addicted. This show was a huge deal. It was this incredibly raw, super authentic story about addiction and recovery, hosted by two guys, John Cook and Haugen Decker. I mean, these guys were on top of the world. They won awards, they landed a deal with a major broadcaster, and they built this incredible, loyal community around their story. And when I say their community was massive, I'm not kidding. Just look at this number. Over 3.5 million downloads. Think about that. This wasn't just some show people listened to on their commute. For so many listeners, it was way more than that. It was like a lifeline, a real source of hope and understanding for people navigating the super complex, often lonely world of recovery. You really got the sense that their success was just unstoppable. And then, poof, it was gone. Just like that. In March of 2025, right at the absolute peak of its popularity, the show just ended. It was so abrupt, so shocking. The feed just went silent, and this huge community, they were just left in the dark, wondering what in the world just happened. So the official explanation that came out was, well, it was frustratingly vague. They just said it was due to personal reasons. That's it. But you have to understand, this was a show and a community built on this idea of radical honesty. So for them, this super sanitized, corporate-sounding explanation, it didn't just feel hollow. For some, it felt like a total betrayal. It definitely raised way more questions than it answered. So that's the big question, isn't it? What really happened behind the curtain at Sucht und Süchtig? Well, the truth is, it's a lot more complicated and, honestly, a lot more revealing than that simple personal reasons line. So let's start peeling back the layers together. Okay, section 1, the deleted confession. This is where the whole official story starts to unravel because of a story that was revealed and then very quickly hid. So here's what happened. Not long after the split, one of the hosts, John Cook, started his own solo podcast. And in one very emotional episode, he basically just laid it all out there. But here's the crazy part. That episode was only online for a few hours before it was taken down. A real blink and you'll miss it moment. But a few hours was more than enough time for the truth to leak out. And in that now-deleted episode, John Cook dropped an absolute bombshell. He revealed something nobody knew, that both he and his co-host, Haugen Decker, had relapsed. And this quote here, "Da haben wir uns ja zerstritten," it basically means that's when we had a falling out. This right here, this was the real reason. It wasn't some vague personal reasons. It was a full-blown crisis rooted in the exact thing their entire show was about. And if you need any more proof of just how bad things had gotten, listen to this. In that same episode, John is talking about a shared music playlist, something personal. But he refers to his former friend and partner not as Hagen, but as Herrn Decker, as Mr. Decker. The German quote here captures that moment. It's such a small thing, but it's so ice cold. That formality tells you everything you need to know about how completely their friendship had fractured. Now, to really get why this hit so hard, we have to talk about something called a parasocial relationship. It sounds academic, but it's simple. It's that one-sided connection you feel with a media figure, like a podcaster or a YouTuber. You feel like you know them. And the listeners of this show, they really felt like they knew John and Hagen. They felt like friends. So when the real story came out, it didn't just feel like a news update. For many, it felt like a friend had been lying to them. It felt personal.
All right, next section, pressure, money, and relapse. Because this falling out, it wasn't just about the personal relapses, as huge as that was. To get the whole picture, you really have to look at the incredible weight that comes with turning something as personal as recovery into a public brand.
There's this addiction researcher, Dr. Marcus Weber, who puts it perfectly. He says that when your recovery is public, a relapse isn't just seen as a personal failure. No, it's seen as a betrayal of the entire community. You can imagine that pressure, right? This pressure to be perfect. It can become this toxic, heavy burden. And here's the terrible irony. That very pressure to be the perfect success story can actually make recovery harder. And you know, this whole thing didn't just happen overnight. It was a slow burn.
If we look at the timeline, even back in 2023 when they were winning awards, there were already disagreements with their producers bubbling under the surface. Then, after a period of therapy, John Cook relapsed. Soon after that, Hagen-Decker also relapsed. And that seems to have been the falling out John mentioned, the final straw. By March 2025, the podcast was dead, and their contract with the big public broadcaster ARD wasn't renewed. The whole thing just imploded. So, what happens after the split? Well, both hosts launched new projects, but on different paths. Hagen-Decker's new project, I'm Rausch, has backing from a professional institute, and he's even doing a national tour. John Cook's project, Cook Mall Einer On, is more independent. But here's the thing that gets complicated. Both of them started using PayPal donation links, asking their audience for money. And when a big chunk of that audience is made up of people also dealing with addiction, well, it raises some really tough ethical questions, doesn't it? Where do you draw the line between asking for support and potentially capitalizing on a very vulnerable community? So, that brings us to our next section, 2 paths to recovery. Because this commercialized model, it's not the only way to do this. There's another way to share these stories publicly, one that's built on a foundation of radical honesty instead. And this really lays out the 2 different philosophies for telling a public recovery story. On one hand, you have what we can call the Sucht and Süchtig model. It's got professional backing, it's monetized through tours and donations, and it's all built around this narrative of success. But then you've got a totally different approach, like this platform called Neelix Berlin. It's completely self-funded by the creator, who is himself an affected individual. There's no active call for donations, and the whole point isn't to sell a success story, but to share the reality of the ongoing process. The person behind this other platform, Gabriel Motz, has this personal motto that I think is just so powerful. It's aus allem Schlechten etwas Gutes machen, which means to make something good out of all the bad. See, for him, the goal isn't to build some big brand. It's about taking his own painful experiences and turning them into a genuine resource to help not just himself, but other people too. It completely reframes what the purpose of sharing your story can even be. And that really is the fundamental difference, isn't it? One approach tries to package recovery like a shiny, finished product you can sell, but that can shatter the moment reality, gets real. The other approach presents recovery for what it is, a continuous, messy, but honest journey, failures and all. And in that model, the struggle itself is what creates the strength and the real connection. Okay, so let's bring it all together. After digging into the mystery, the confession, and these 2 very different models of public recovery, what can we actually learn from this whole story? What are the big takeaways? Well, I think there are a few really crucial lessons here. First, the pressure to look cured can be incredibly toxic for someone who's actually trying to recover. Second, when we idealize public figures, we set ourselves up for disappointment and even feelings of betrayal when they turn out to be human. It also shows us that when you turn your personal story into a commercial product, transparency isn't just nice to have, it's absolutely essential. And this is a big one. Peer support is so valuable, but it is never a substitute for professional therapy. And maybe the most important lesson of all, real, authentic stories have to make room for failure, not just the highlight reel of success. And all of this leaves us with one final, really important question. In this modern creator economy, where our deepest, most personal struggles can be packaged up and sold as content, who really pays the price? Is it the creator, who's crushed by the weight of having to perform their own recovery? Or is it the audience, who might be buying into a story that isn't quite as authentic as it seems? It's a tough question, and one that's definitely worth thinking about.